This podcast is part of the Batman Universe Podcast Network, hosted by the BatmanUniverse.net. Check out everything related to Batman and the entire Bat family at the BatmanUniverse.net, including news and original content related to comics, movies, television, merchandise, video games, and more. Also, check out some of the other unique podcasts that TBU has to offer. Consider supporting this podcast by becoming a patron on Patreon. Even $1 can go a long way in supporting this content that you enjoy. Look for a link over at thebatmanuniverse.net to offer your support now. And now, on with the show.
Greetings, Gothamites. Layne here. Welcome to episode 8 of Batman books The Dark Knight in Prose, where the only pictures are those formed in the imagination. Today we're covering chapters 18 and 19, and that will bring us to the end of book number 1. Next episode will be the commentary episode of the 1989 Batman, and I'll announce what the next book will be there. I'd like to give a shout out to the I Read Movies podcast over on Twitter at iReadMoviesPod. They tweeted, "I am thoroughly enjoying Batman Books _DKP's deep dive into the Batman 89 movie novelization. It goes a few chapters at a time, really savoring it like a fine wine." Unquote. Thank you so much for that. I really appreciate that. That was very kind. Listeners, I encourage you to check out the I Read Movies podcast, the monthly podcast all about movie/TV novelizations. I know I'm certainly going to. That sounds like a podcast that would be right up my alley. And as always, you can send comments, questions, or feedback to BatmanBooks _DKP on Twitter or darkknightprose@gmail.com. Alright, let's get Chapter 18 started. Chapter 18, Scene 1. Commissioner Gordon pulled his car over at the edge of the destruction. He could hardly recognize this stretch of Broad Avenue anymore. Windows and streetlights were smashed. Twisted bits of metal littered the avenue and the sidewalks on either side, that is, where the road still existed. Up ahead, he could see the avenue abruptly stop at the lip of a crater. What had these guys been fighting with out here? Heat-seeking missiles? A dozen squad cars also arrive on scene, but they can go no farther due to the condition of Broad Avenue. They will need to continue on foot. Gordon notes a few dead bodies, but not nearly as many as he feared there would be. He hopes he can put a stop to the chaos before any more citizens lose their lives. This latest round of shenanigans seems to have broken the mayor's mind completely. He's all but in a fetal position, while Harvey Dent runs police headquarters and perhaps all of Gotham City pretty much single-handedly. Gordon has left the building to see what he could do on the streets. We learn that over 90% of the police force, close to 2,000 cops, are hospitalized, but thankfully none of them have died. Robbery and looting is everywhere because every crook and lowlife in town realizes the police force is operating on a skeleton crew. The National Guard is on its way, but won't be fully mobilized until the following morning. Gordon looks over his officers, 26 men and women, pretty much all that is left of the GCPD. Moving in a V formation, with Gordon at the head, they move into the war zone. My notes. Okay, so we learned just how decimated the police force is. Earlier on in the book, it was hinted that up to 2/3 were out of commission, but now we know the force is down to 10%. But still, I think they could have nipped Joker in the bud if they had heeded his advertisements about the parade and laid an ambush for him at the storage facility. And I like the quote about every crook and lowlife in town realizing the cops have been decimated. Would that have anything to do with Harvey Dent's announcement on the local news that most of the police force was down? I called it. I knew at the time it was not a good idea to put that kind of information out there. Not to say I told you so, Dent, but I told you so. Chapter 18, Scene 2. It's a short one. "Thomas, I think someone is following us." His mother's voice. They had just come from the theater. Why couldn't he remember the play? The sound of running feet. His mother and father, so tall to either side, hustling him down the street, away from something. But they couldn't get away. Not by running. He knew that now. How could he tell his mother and father not to run? Why didn't they know it? They ran toward a man with a gun. A boy, really. Only a few years older than he was. But the gun made him a big man. The boy with the gun turned to look at them. Bruce remembered that smile. He had seen it so many times before. But the rest of the boy's face was different. Made up like a clown. Grease paint white with blood-red lips and wild green hair. The clown was new. Batman knew it didn't make any difference. They still couldn't run. Why didn't his parents see? The gun went off twice before he could tell them. Twin blossoms of flame that touched both his mother and father, turning them to ash. The clown started to laugh, but Bruce knew he couldn't be afraid. "Did you ever dance with the devil by the pale moonlight?" the clown asked. But Bruce didn't cower. He didn't run. Instead, he walked toward the clown. The dance was about to begin. Then all was blackness. My notes. I don't really have anything about the scene itself to add, but I will add a little personal note. Recurring nightmares can be incredibly taxing. I lost my mother just under 4 years ago. It was sudden, and she lived with me, so everything in the house still reminds me of her. Anyway, for the first 6 weeks after her death, I kept dreaming that her death had been a dream, and I would wake up every morning with relief, at least until the realization hit me again. Every morning. Gradually, my dreams, nightmares really, have changed to me finding out that she's been alive this whole time, but she's either been in the hospital or some other place, and she didn't want us to know that she was alive. The emotions I feel in these dreams, intense relief that she is alive, but a bitter sense of betrayal and confusion that she would just leave us. These feelings are at least as sharp as they would be in waking life, if not even stronger. I always wake up after having this dream feeling more exhausted than when I'd gone to bed the night before. I'm always interested in dreams and fiction, but after suffering my own recurring nightmares, I don't think many books or TV shows or whatever really truly capture the side effects of such dreams. I mean, they'll depict the dreams themselves, often in a very artful and amazing way, but they rarely show the physical, emotional, and psychological exhaustion that comes with them, nor the anxiety when it's time to go to sleep for fear of having the nightmare again. I haven't told many people about my recurring nightmares about my mother, and now I've just spoken it into the ether. I'm not sure how many of you there are out there listening. Some of you I know, some of you I don't. But I wanted to share that little bit about myself. So back to this scene, it looks like Bruce's nightmare is evolving into something else now that some pieces of the puzzle have been solved regarding his parents' murder. Chapter 18, Scene 3. What was it with these good citizens? Here was the Joker, busy having a good laugh, and all these people started showing up from the side streets and bombed out buildings. Worse than that, they had the temerity to be angry. Didn't they know that this was the Joker's party? Heck, they should be happy just to be alive. Why, the very thought of it made him want to laugh. The ingrates actually have the nerve to start throwing things at him. Well, this is the last time he'll try to entertain them before killing them. He sees police arriving on scene. Time for a change of scenery. He'll go check on Batman. He fires a round into the air to get the crowd to back off. Much better. As he starts toward Batman's jet, it explodes. Well, darn. He'll have to have his final showdown with someone else. Who was he forgetting? Oh yes! A woman named Vicky. My notes. I don't really have anything to add to this scene either, except to say, I imagine it's difficult to capture the essence of the Joker from his perspective. I don't have enough history with the character to know if Gardner is successful in writing from Joker's point of view or not. The only instance I have outside of this book of seeing something played out from the Joker's point of view is in the game Arkham Origins. So a lot of you who have played these games will know what I'm talking about. For those of you who haven't played the game, there's a small part in Arkham Origins where Joker is a playable character while he talks to Dr. Harleen Quinzel. I think the game version of the Joker is quite compelling. But the novelization Joker? I actually found him more interesting as Jack Napier. Once he became the Joker, his scenes are kind of repetitive and predictable, in my opinion. Chapter 18, Scene 4. Vicky came out of hiding when she heard the explosion. It had taken her only a moment to examine Knox's wounds. The reporter had been incredibly lucky. A bullet had creased his shoulder, glass had cut his forehead. Besides that, he was unharmed. The 2 wounds looked messy at first, but the bleeding had already stopped. He wouldn't die from either of them. He had probably passed out from the shock more than anything else. She would have to get him to the hospital soon to get him cleaned up. But there was something else she had to do first. She had seen the plane crash into the steps of the cathedral, the Batman's plane. She needs to find out what happened to Bruce. Nobody could survive that crash, could they? The wreckage moves. A metal plate falls to the steps, and Batman stands in the destroyed Batwing. Hardly believing what she's seeing, Vicky starts toward him, but then feels a gun pressed to her left temple. The Joker says, "Looks like I'll have to get you to the church on time." He calls for transportation in his walkie-talkie in 5 minutes, but after taking in the height of the tower, amends it to better make that 10. My notes. So Vicky was in the area when the Batman crashed, which means she was in the area when Batman was carrying out Operation Eradication. See, I told you in episode 7 that if any citizens were hiding behind the floats and trucks, Batman DGAF. Good thing Vicky didn't find herself in the path of Batman's destructive justice. So let's see what it says on the Batman fandom wiki about Gotham Cathedral. Its official name is Gotham City Cathedral, created by Anton Furst and Tim Burton, and its first appearance was in the '89 Batman. A Gotham Cathedral was a condemned church in Gotham City, the highest point in the city's skyline at 800 feet tall. It is instantly recognizable, towering over all other buildings. The old cathedral was located behind the Flugelheim Museum at the end of Broad Avenue. A little bit on its history. Early in his career, Batman frequently made scaling the cathedral part of his routine. Perched up out the belfry walkway, he blended in with the building's gargoyles and grotesques. Now, a little bit about its involvement in the '89 Batman. Behind the scenes, the design, Anton Furst found inspiration in Gaudi's cone-shaped cathedral in Barcelona, combining it with elements of a Japanese fortress. Some production changes. Vicky Vale and the Goons, which will be my horror punk band's name, were added to the belfry scenes at the behest of John Peters after he read a Wall Street Journal article about the film, concerned with making Batman seem tough. In the Warren Scarron shooting script, the bat signal was originally projected on the cathedral rather than the sky. In other media, the Lego Batman, the video game, Gotham Cathedral made an appearance in the story. In Batman Arkham Origins, a cathedral, it says a cathedral, not necessarily Gotham Cathedral, was used by Black Mask as a home to his drug operations after the Joker took over the steel mill. After he destroyed the various drug canisters that were spread across Gotham City, Batman defeated Black Mask's armed henchmen inside the church, and later on captured Sionis when the latter confronted him at the church and left him for the GCPD. Batman Arkham City, a cathedral later reappeared in Batman Arkham City. In it, a cathedral was one of the locations within Arkham City. It was converted into a medical center, which was also where the Joker's gang, led by Harley Quinn, kept medics as well as former members of the Arkham Asylum security force hostage. Joker also utilized one of his mannequins to man a sniper rifle in an attempt to assassinate Catwoman at the bell tower. Batman freed the hostages and tracked down the Joker so that he could interrogate him about Protocol 10, as he was believed to be working with Professor Hugo Strange. However, Joker anticipated that possibility and rigged the top of the cathedral to explode, and Batman just barely escaped, yada yada yada. Okay, and this part is not on the wiki, but Gotham Cathedral also gets some screen time early on in Season 2 of the TV show Gotham. That's enough of that. On to the next scene. Alright, Chapter 18, Scene 5. It's a very short one. Batman hauled himself from the smoldering ruins of the plane. He knew he was badly hurt. Pain stabbed his chest, and he felt blood trickling down his cheek under his mask from a gash in his head. He looked down at his body and saw torn and bruised flesh under the shredded costume. But he was still alive. He could still move, and his task was not yet finished. He looked around. At the top of the steps, visible through the smoke from the plane, the Joker was entering the cathedral. He had someone with him. Someone he was prodding with a revolver. A woman, Vicky. Batman stifled an urge to cry out and began to run. My notes. I feel like Batman is the only one who consistently refers to Vicky as a woman instead of as a girl, like Knox and Joker tend to do. On page 49, Bruce, quote, looked over at the woman who slept beside him in the king-size bed, unquote. So thank you, Bruce. Chapter 18, Scene 6. Thomas, there's someone following us. He wrenched open the door to Gotham Cathedral. Where were the Joker and Vicky? They must be somewhere inside the ruined building, or maybe in the tower. Thomas, there's someone. He shut the door behind him. There was a bar next to the door, a thick piece of oak, still firm. He placed the bar in the metal brackets on the inner part of the door so that no one else could come in to disturb them. Batman listens, but he hears nothing. The Joker is hiding. He takes a step forward, but there is a step down that he doesn't see. He loses his footing and falls heavily into an old wooden pew. It creates a domino effect, each pew knocking down the one in front of it, all the way to the front of the church. So much for surprise. After the last pew fell, Joker leaps out from behind the altar, holding Vicky in front of him. "Missed me," Joker says. Then Vicky and the Joker disappear through a door. Batman starts forward. It's hard to walk, painful to breathe. He's most likely broken some ribs in the crash, and falling into the pews hasn't helped. He makes his way to the foot of a long, steep flight of steps leading to the tower, 800 feet above, and he begins to climb. My notes... Good job with the pews there, Batman. That's something I would have done. Stealthy as a ninja. And Joker, why bother with a tower? The helicopter can probably pick you up at street level. I think there's Gotham Square nearby. That sounds like a fairly open area. I don't know. I guess he wants to be melodramatic. Can't blame him, I guess. I mean, he is being directed by Tim Burton. It doesn't seem like Joker and Vicky have much of a head start on Batman. Maybe, a few seconds? And I know Batman is injured, but he's also Batman. And I feel like he would have some gadget that would easily incapacitate the Joker if he's only a few seconds ahead of him. Chapter 18, Scene 7. Gordon and the police, and that's going to be the name of my easy-listening rock band. Gordon and the police climbed the stairs to the cathedral. They had met no resistance on the way. The Joker, apparently, was on his own, as was the Batman. The Commissioner had seen the whole drama spread out before him. The Batman's plane smashed on the steps of Gotham Cathedral, the Joker firing his gun in the air to stun the crowd and make his escape, the explosion, and Batman rising from the wreckage. He also witnessed both Batman and the Joker going into the cathedral, and he wonders what is going on inside right now. Quote, part of him wanted to hold his men back and let the Batman take the Joker apart piece by piece. Part of him, Gordon realized, wished that he could be the Batman, unquote. We all do, Jim. We all do. But that's not Jim's job. Regardless of who he is fighting, Batman is still working outside of the law, and law and order need to be restored. Gordon tells his men to break down the door. My notes. Gordon and the police. Okay, the musician Sting's real first name is Gordon, and he was in a band called the Police. This can mean only one thing, listeners. Sting is Jim Gordon working deep undercover. Chapter 18, Scene 8, another short one. You couldn't keep a good crime fighter down. It had surprised the Joker for a moment to see that costumed nut up and stumbling. But once you had survived a dunking in toxic waste, nothing surprised you for long. Maybe the two of them would have their showdown after all. They would, that is, if the Joker couldn't get out of here fast enough. But he had a date with a helicopter in another 5 minutes and a whole slew of stairs to climb. He heard Batman grunting far below him. On the steps above him, Vicky was panting. The Joker himself wasn't breathing hard at all. My notes, good on you, Joker, for keeping up with your cardio. A little feet-to-story converter online tells me that 800 feet is almost 74 stories. Nope, not until I've hit the stair climber for a few months. I do need to get back to that, actually. Still, Batman climbing 74 stories with broken ribs is going to be pretty darned impressive, though. Chapter 18, Scene 9, another short one. He couldn't run. There was a man with a gun. There was more wrong with him than a few broken ribs. As the adrenaline drained from his body, he could feel where he had wrenched his right knee. He had to be careful to stand on it just the right way, or his leg would give out on him. He must have torn something in his left hand as well. When he tried to straighten the last two fingers, he wanted to scream. There was a man with a gun. He knew the man's smile. He wanted to scream, but he didn't. He wouldn't give the Joker the pleasure of knowing his problems or his location. He knew the man's smile. The broken ribs dug into his side when he lifted his right leg, but he couldn't stop. The Joker was up there somewhere, waiting for him. The Joker and Vicky. My notes, adrenaline can do a lot for you for a short time. I saw a video once of one of those guys who do trick jumps on motorcycles. This guy landed very badly. He got up, took a couple of steps, waved to the crowd, and then just crumpled. He had actually broken his neck. If I recall correctly, he didn't damage his spinal cord, but the swelling paralyzed him for a short time, so he was very lucky. I think Gardner does a good job here of getting across just how much Batman is struggling. Chapter 18, Scene 10. There was a trapdoor overhead, the top of the stairs, and his ticket out of here. It just proved that if you kept a sunny attitude, any job would go right. He reached past Vicky and pushed open the trapdoor. There. Upsy-daisy, he said to Vicky as he gave her a final shove up into the belfry. As the Joker followed her up, someone said, "Hiya, boss." 3 men were waiting for him, the 3 bozos he had hired from that kung fu studio. He had never learned their names, so that's how he thought of them, as Bozo 1, Bozo 2, and Bozo 3. Joker asks why they were there, and they reply that they wanted a good view of what has been going on. They have a little time to kill, so Joker explores his surroundings. A small room with 4 slatted windows, designed to let sound out while keeping the weather from getting inside. There was a large bell in the middle of the room and 2 other smaller rockers to either side that were missing their bells. Actually, the bells aren't missing, but are on the floor, and Joker nearly stumbles over them. How convenient. 2 bells close to the edge of the trapdoor. So close to a little accident. The bells were heavy. Using the acid from his lapel flower, Joker loosens one and sends it tumbling. This is even better than bowling. My notes, out of curiosity, I looked online to see the average weight of a bell. According to Brossemer's Bells, the typical size of a church bell is 28 inches in diameter and weighs 450 pounds. That is, of course, on the smaller size, and is probably the size of the 2, quote, smaller bells that Joker rolls down the stairs. And a 28-inch bell rings in C sharp. Doubling that size with a 56-inch diameter bell, which rings in E flat, it weighs in at 3,500 pounds. So you can see the weight grows exponentially with the increase in diameter. The 1876 Centennial Bell and the 1893 Columbian Bell, both manufactured by the Manili Bell Company, both weigh 13,000 pounds. The Liberty Bell in Philadelphia is a svelte 2,080 pounds by comparison. So yeah, the 2 smaller bells are easily on the 450 to 500 pound, depending on their size. Since we aren't given a diameter of the larger bell, it's hard to determine its weight, but I'm sure it easily tops a couple thousand pounds. And this is Gotham, go big or go home. So I have a feeling it's going to be a huge bell. Chapter 18, Scene 11, a short one. Gordon barely got his men out of there in time. The noise had been horrendous. The bell had come tumbling down the stairs, crashing and banging against wooden planks and stone walls, tearing away steps and mortar as it went. As it gained momentum, it crashed through a rotten section of the steps, ripping away a whole 6-foot section. By the time the bell had smashed on the stone floor at the base of the tower, it had done its damage. Maybe they could have gotten past that 6-foot gap in the stairway, and 2 other similar gaps Gordon could see higher up in the tower. But the rest of the staircase was no longer solid either. Whole sections leaned crazily toward one wall or the other, and there were dozens of new holes and missing planks. This stairway would never be used again. Batman and the Joker had the battle to themselves after all. That was, Gordon thought, if both of them were still alive. My notes, nothing really to add here other than that, no, I would not want to be under one of those bells when it came down. And if that staircase wasn't enough to make me go nope before, it certainly gets a nope from me now. Chapter 18, Scene 12. We're on Scene 12 already. This chapter is going on forever. Here's another short one. Thomas, Thomas, Thomas. He heard his heart beat heavily in his chest. He'd barely dodged the bell. Thomas. Someone following. Can't run. Man with a gun. He was almost at the top of the stairs. If only he could ignore the pain. He closed his eyes. Can't run. Man with a gun. He forced his eyes open and took the stairs. One, then another, and another. He rested for a moment on a window ledge. The stairs ended ahead at a closed trapdoor. Not far to go. Man with a gun. He knew that smile. Somehow he was back on the stairs. Somehow he reached the trapdoor. He pushed against it. It was stuck. He tried again, but he had no strength. His eyes closed again. He knew that smile. You ever dance with the devil? My notes, I liked how the opening of Thomas, Thomas, Thomas seems to echo the heartbeat that Batman hears. If I can do it justice, if I can do it justice, I'll add a little sound effect to my reading of it in this scene. Chapter 18, Scene 13. No, seriously, this chapter is long. By the pale moonlight. The Joker always found comfort in those words. Besides, he owed it to himself to say this little piece aloud. He had to have killed somebody with that bell. Joker thinks he hears something under the trapdoor. Curious, he wrestles the second bell off the trapdoor so that he can pull it open. Nobody there. After a couple of jokes about bats, Joker grows irritated at Vicky for not laughing. He jabs his gun barrel into her jaw and says, "You're going to have to learn to laugh at my jokes." A spotlight from street level shines through the slatted windows. The illumination will simply serve to assist his helicopter pilot. Bozo 2 says, "Boss, I think I heard something moving down there." Joker replies, "Goody, goody! Our fun isn't over yet. We can play hide and seek, and whoever comes through the trapdoor is it." My notes. So I'm taking it that Batman was hidden when Joker opened the door. He doesn't seem to be in any condition to make the extra effort to be stealthy, so I guess we'll see. Chapter 18, Scene 14. It's never going to end. On the third try, Batman managed to push open the trapdoor. Ignoring the agony throbbing through his body, he heaved himself up and into the belfry. He paused. He could see the glare of spotlights shining around the edges of slats and 4 small windows and the shapes of 2 large bells, and coming from below he heard sirens and voices. Gordon would be assembling his forces, searching for an avenue of attack. But by the time he found one, whatever was going to happen would be finished. Batman wonders where the Joker and Vicky are. Before his eyes regain the night vision that the spotlights ruined for him, he hears someone say, "It seems I have a bat in my belfry." There was a shriek, then Batman sensed rather than saw a man cartwheeling across the floor. Blades jutted from the man's boots. Trained to simply react in moments like this, he punches the man in the crotch as he is in mid-somersault. The man drops to the floor, clutching himself. Looking around, Batman sees the Joker out on the roof. His arm locked onto Vicky's throat and a gun pressed to her head. Before he can plan his attack, a noise overhead prompts him to fling himself to one side. But the man apparently had not counted on the open trapdoor, because he now falls through the opening and plummets to his death below. Didn't think that one through, did he? The final bozo is a huge one with terrible scars on his face. He is swinging a rope with a pulley tied to one end. An improvised weapon, but still a lethal one. Every evasive maneuver the Batman must take causes him agony. When he sees his chance, he steps inside the arc of the blow to attack the man's solar plexus. Most people would be instantly paralyzed by that strike, but this man only grunts and grins. Outside, the Joker dances with Vicky as he hums a Strauss tune. Vicky watches the fight through the door and despairs of Batman winning. My notes, that was a weird point of view shift there at the end. It was all Batman's point of view, then it switched to Vicky's right at the end, so my guess is that when they printed the book, they neglected to do a scene break there. It is interesting how you can train your body to react without thinking. I've studied Aikido on and off for 10 years now. I used to go religiously every single week, but after I broke my ankle and then I lost my mother, so my attendance has been spotty the last few years. But anyway, the first thing we learn is to get off the line of attack. And that can be as simple as just sidestepping. If you can get out of the way of the initial punch or kick or whatever, that will buy you just a little bit more time to react as the blow is withdrawn. One day, back when I was either an orange belt or a brand new green belt, the guy I was sparring with, he was 2nd degree black at the time, and we were friends, and he kind of playfully threw a punch at me. It would have landed far short of my face, but at that moment someone bumped into him and knocked him forward. Instead of the punch falling short, as I said, it would have connected to my face. Without thinking, I did a 90-degree sidestep and watched the punch go past my face. And I was rather tickled with myself for how effortlessly my body reacted, with basically zero conscious thought on my part. And it's kind of funny, on the Arkham games, when you do a takedown move of breaking one of the opponent's arms, that move is what we call at my dojo, one of the basic 17. I can't remember the Japanese name for that move specifically, but it's one that I've done and one that I've had done to me countless times. Of course, the uke will tap out when the lock has been accomplished, but I always find it a bit interesting in the Arkham game because, of course, the goon is not going to tap out. Batman is going to finish the technique. And, it's kind of interesting to see what happens with the follow-through, because it is designed to break a limb. And it's a little scary sometimes how little effort it is required to really mess someone up. And this has been Aikido Talk. Anyway, that one dude jumping down from the rafters and accidentally plummeting through the open trapdoor, he really needs to work on his situational awareness. Chapter 18, Scene 15, another short one. Batman circled his opponent. His breath came out in short gasps, and each gasp brought a new pain. He had given the scarred man his best shot, and it had accomplished nothing. How long could he continue before his legs would no longer support him? No more than a minute, surely. He scanned the belfry, searching for a weapon, but there was only the bell. The bell. Batman crouched and sprang. His jump carried him to the top of the bell. For a second he teetered, finding his balance. Then, as the scarred man began to whirl the pulley over his head, Batman leapt. The scarred man scuttled aside. Batman continued downward past the scarred man and into the open trapdoor. Continued falling. My notes. And that one Batman jumping down from the bell and accidentally plummeting through the open trapdoor, he needs to work on his situational awareness. Seriously though, we all know this wasn't accidental. Chapter 18, Scene 16. The chapter's still going. Send help. Vicky saw Batman vanish below the floor of the belfry. The lump of despair filled her whole being, but only for a second. She was alone? All right. If this had to be her fight, she accepted it. She looked down at the street and the searchlights. This was her weapon. The fact that they were 800 feet above the pavement. The height and her courage and her wits, these would be enough. You dance divinely, she purred. My notes, atta girl Vicky. Though part of me wonders, there wasn't an opportunity to fight the Joker during all of those stairs. Though I suppose if Batman were on the loose, I would put all my chips on him to save me too. Doing something on my own that would possibly fail and get me killed would be a very distant plan B. But we really never know what we'll do in situations like this until we are put in situations like this. Chapter 18, Scene 17. Tell my family that I love them. The scarred man peered down the stairwell. He hadn't heard the caped fool land. It was so dark, impossible to see. 2 legs shot from the stairwell and clamped around the scarred man's head. Batman had grabbed part of a broken rafter just under the trap door and hung there until the bulk of his enemy appeared in the opening, as he knew it would. Then he bent his body in an upward V and slammed his legs to either side of the scarred man's head. The pain was beyond anything he had ever imagined, but although he felt it, he somehow no longer cared about it. He levered his legs past the lip of the trapdoor and rammed the scarred man's skull into the bell. Once, twice, again and again, the scarred man relaxed, went limp. His body slid into the opening, and as Batman released it, plummeted into the stairwell. My notes? Did Batman just intentionally drop that man to his death? There's that gray area. Batman doesn't kill people. Gravity kills people. But yeah, I can't imagine the pain of having to do all of this with broken ribs and whatever else he's got going on. Who knows what the broken bones have punctured by this point. Alfred is going to have his work cut out for him for putting Master Bruce back together again. Chapter 18, Scene 18. In a rare switch-up, since there's a lot of dialogue in this scene, I figure it's the perfect time for... Rest in Peace Theater is proud to present That Time Joker and Batman Have a Spat.
You say such beautiful things. You're so strong. And I love purple.
Pardon me. Have you ever danced with the devil in the pale moonlight? I'm gonna kill you.
You crazy bastard. You made me. Remember? You dropped me into the acid. It was pretty hard to settle down after that. God knows I tried.
I know you did. You murdered my parents.
What are you talking about?
I made you. But you made me first.
You lunatic. Criminy ditch. I say you made me, so you have to say I made you. How childish can you get? You wouldn't hit a man of glasses, would ya?
The punch knocks the Joker off balance, and he has time to glance over his shoulder before he falls off the parapet. Batman's strength fails him. Vicky rushes to him and helps him stand. They look together over the edge, but saw nothing in the glare of the floodlights below. The moon shows the silhouette of a helicopter approaching. Suddenly, a pair of hands shot up, grabbing Vicky's and Batman's wrists, and the two are being pulled toward the edge. They go over, but Batman manages to grab hold of Vicky and hold them both with the help of one of the cathedral's gargoyles. Joker stands atop the gargoyle, laughing and stamping on Batman's fingers. Batman grabs Joker's ankle. The gargoyle starts to break away from the cathedral. As the helicopter hovers above, Joker reaches a hand down to Vicky. Batman tells her to go ahead and take the help, that he can take care of himself. Vicky does so, but her grip on the Joker slips, and she falls. Batman grabs her by the upper arm, the two dangling over 800 feet of empty air. A rope ladder descends from the helicopter. Joker climbs onto the rungs and waves a farewell to Vicky and Batman. By this time, Vicky has managed to regain her grip on the gargoyle. Quote, he had done his best, Batman told himself. Maybe he could get Vicky and himself to safety before the gargoyle finally tore completely loose, and then he could rest. He had earned a rest. He deserved it. He remembered Thomas and Martha Wayne, blood spilling onto a dirty sidewalk, the sobs of the child he had been. The years of loneliness. The Joker was rising into the circle of the moon. Have you ever danced with the devil in the pale moonlight? The dance was not over yet. Unquote. With his strength waning, Batman manages to pull one of his tools from his belt. He aims and fires. A thin metal line finds and wraps around the Joker's ankles. Batman wraps his end of the tether around the gargoyle's snout. The Joker's eyes grow wide. He yells to the helicopter pilot, "Stop! Wait! Down! Down!" Batman boosts Vicky onto the gargoyle, and from there she manages to get to a ledge. The gargoyle breaks free. The helicopter dips, then recovers, but the Joker is clinging for his life as the gargoyle hangs from his ankles. Inevitably, his grip breaks. He shrieks with laughter as he plunges down, down, down. Vicky flattens herself against the wall of the cathedral. Batman is beside her and warns her that the ledge can't take their weight. After all she has been through, she's going to die anyway. My notes? Phew, what a scene. Again, quick thinking on Vicky's part to distract the Joker so that Batman can move in for the attack. I'm not sure how the Joker managed to not fall to his death when he first went over the edge, but I guess the assumption we make is that he somehow managed to fall onto the narrow ledge and then managed to pull Vicky and Batman over by the ankles without also falling himself. Well, we'll just not think about it too much. For the gargoyles, apparently gargoyles and grotesques falling from their buildings is not unheard of. Sadly, in 2014, a 34-year-old woman in Chicago was just a few blocks away from her home when a piece of a gargoyle fell from the Second Presbyterian Church and struck her on the head and killed her. She was a mother of 2, and that is just tragic. In 2017, an article was published in The Guardian saying that 100 million euros were needed to save the gargoyles and Gothic arches of Notre Dame, as many had already begun to crumble and fall. This is a recurring issue with any building with large, heavy gargoyles, and is in no way limited to the church in Chicago, Notre Dame, or Gotham Cathedral. I wasn't at all surprised that Batman has a moment of just wanting to let go. He wants to get himself and Vicky up to safety, but it almost sounds like once he does that, he's ready to just lay down and die. That just seems to fit with the aspect of the character that I'm familiar with. Thankfully, in this instance, he's able to regather his wits. Though it surprised me he thinks of his parents as Thomas and Martha Wayne and not just mom and dad, or even my parents. I tried to find an average weight of a gargoyle because I was curious how much weight the Joker was holding. I didn't really have much luck on a cursory search. The gargoyle drops him to the street below, giving him a death that is grotesque. And yes, that was a pun. A bad one. Chapter 18, Scene 19. No! Batman saw the street rushing up to meet him and to shatter him as it had shattered the gargoyle. But he had time, maybe as much as 2 seconds, and that would have to be enough. If it wasn't, the Joker would have won. He unsnapped his grappling hook from the back of his belt, under his cape, and with a flick of his wrist sent it shooting sideways. It clanked against one of the lower gargoyles. Batman circled his wrist twice around the wire attached to the hook. The steel tine scraped against the back of the gargoyle's head and sank into the soft stone. Batman and Vicky's free fall jerks to a halt only a couple of yards above the pavement. A fresh wave of excruciating pain goes from Batman's shoulder to his broken ribs, but it's the last new pain he will have to endure tonight. Down below, Gordon and the police are running toward them. Batman lowers Vicky to the ground, and soon they are both on solid footing. Batman glimpses the Joker's body. Someone yells, "Over there!" When Vicky turns to speak to Batman, he is gone. My notes. This is one of those cases where if the rope Batman is using doesn't have some sort of elasticity, he and Vicky would be dead. They were 800 feet up and fell until they were only a couple of yards off the ground. So basically they free fell 794 feet. If it were a dead stop, they'd be just that. Dead. on the pavement, and Batman's arm would still be swinging from the line while the rest of him lay below. Gruesome, ain't it? So we'll give them the benefit of the doubt that them, quote-unquote, jerking to a halt wasn't that hard of a jerk. Either way, Batman knows the pain of the drop will be the last new pain he would have to endure tonight, right? Well, Batman, don't write off the possibility of stubbing your toe on the way to getting something to drink. But maybe having a butler severely limits the risk of stubbing one's toe, and Alfred always wears shoes. All the little piggies of Wayne Manor should be safe then. As for the Joker's death, I wish the internet had been more of a thing in 1989 because I would have loved to see people's reactions at the time to the Joker being killed off in this version. Instead, I went to YouTube and tried to find a couple of comments that might reflect how the fans felt. So the following comments are from the YouTube channel Flashback FM on their 5-minute video covering the Joker's death. User The Paranormalist writes, "His death scene with the Joker lying dead on the pavement still grinning with laughter makes this scene very haunting." User Tony Armijo writes, "I remember being a 4-year-old boy and the death scene scared the hell out of me." This is Layne speaking. For that matter, me too. I wasn't sure if he was really dead or not, with the laughter still coming. I think that was the director's way of showing that the Joker never truly is dead. Anyway, user James007 Hunger Zone writes, "Making the Joker the man who killed Batman's parents was pure genius." I was trying to think of how to word my response to that, but user Jake J. Jacob puts it perfectly in his reply. "I agree, in a film sense you're right. It was the best way to tell a story and introduce non-comic fans to the tale of Batman. But to hardcore comic fans, it was a hard pill to swallow, I'm afraid." So, not really what I was looking for or what I was expecting when I looked for replies, but good stuff nonetheless. Of course, listeners, you are welcome to write in and tell me your thoughts on the quote-unquote death of Joker in the 1989 film at BatmanBooks_DKP on Twitter or darkknightprose@gmail.com. With that, Chapter 18 is done. Let's take a much-needed promo break and wrap up with Chapter 19 when we come back.
In the shadowed recesses of our world, monsters lurk. Beasts from a bygone era, obscured by the thickest forests, deepest oceans, and darkest corners. Despite our reluctance to find them, and unlucky few cross paths, it's these experiences that we explore at Monsters Among Us podcast. My name is Derek Hayes, your faithful host and guide. Each week I explore calls from around the world detailing chilling encounters with mystery beasts, ghosts, UFOs, and a plethora of other strange happenings. You can find Monsters Among Us podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, and most other podcatchers. Beware, there truly are monsters among us.
Hi, I'm Layne, and I don't know enough about Batman.
Hi, Layne. Hi, I'm Kat, and I don't know enough about Batman.
Hi, Kat. We've taken the first steps by admitting that we have a problem.
Now, we're doing something about it.
We are here to learn about Gotham's past, stories of those who live there, fighting crime, making crime, and trying to survive the night.
Join us at our meeting.
Podcast.
Podcast? Podcast. Join us at our podcast as we get with the program.
One graphic novel at a time at Gothamites Anonymous. Welcome back, Gothamites. It's time to tackle the final chapter of Batman. Chapter 19, Scene 1, starting off with a short one. Slowly, Vicky walked to where a crowd was gathered over a body, face down, completely covered by Batman's cape. Commissioner Gordon pushed his way through the curiosity seekers. Vicky followed his wake. "Turn him over," one of the onlookers yelled. "Now we'll see who this guy is." Vicky moved to the front of the crowd as a couple of them turned over the body. Gordon knelt next to it, shooing the curiosity seekers away. The man groaned as Gordon pulled off his hood. It was Alexander Knox. He blinked in the sudden light. "Can I still make the late edition?" he asked. "My notes? For a moment there, I thought we were going to find the Joker under the Batman's cape. And that actually felt right to me. The Batman would still have enough, I don't know if compassion's the right word, maybe sense of duty, to cover the Joker with his cloak after his death. Allie Knox, though. He's here to provide a little comic relief. Chapter 19, Scene 2. This was the first press conference Gordon could remember looking forward to in a long, long time. "All right," Dent began. "Members of the press, Commissioner Gordon and I have a few announcements to make." He waited for the reporters gathered around the steps to City Hall to quiet down before he continued. "First of all, to clear up a little misunderstanding, Gotham Globe reporter Alexander Knox is not the Batman." The reporters all laughed at that. Knox, standing next to Gordon and Dent, touched his bandaged head in a mock salute. "On the other hand," he remarked dryly, "Batman is not Alexander Knox." Now it was Gordon's turn to say a word or two. "Our police officers have recovered, and although some of them have sworn off coffee, they're all back on duty." The reporters all laughed again. Finally, Gordon thought, this sort of event was a real pleasure, for himself and all of Gotham City. It just proved you had to have faith. He had always told himself that if he waited long enough, he'd find something positive about his job. My notes? I don't know about the whole Gordon knowing if he waited long enough he'd find something positive about his job thing. I think his idealism was burned out of him long, long ago, but I'm still glad he's happy. Just a minor nitpick on this line, quote, "On the other hand," he remarked dryly, "Batman is not Alexander Knox," unquote. It's not clear who's speaking here. It's not in the same paragraph as Allie Knox's actions, but it sounds like something he would say. Chapter 19, Scene 3. Allie Knox was surprised to see a familiar and very attractive face next to him on the stage. "Vicky," he asked, "are you covering this press conference?" She smiled at him very sweetly. "No," she said softly, "I'm going to disappear for a while." She leaned over and kissed him. Really kissed him. For the first time he could remember, Alexander Knox was at a loss for words. Vicky turns to leave, but Knox, sure that the kiss meant something more, asks her, "Wait a minute, what about us?" Vicky is still walking away. "What about the Pulitzer Prize?" This makes her turn around. "You get mine for me, Allie." "What about your pictures of Batman?" She replies, "If he wants his picture taken, he knows where to find me." She turns a corner and is out of sight. Nearby, Dent continues in the microphone. Quote, "We received a letter from Batman this morning. Gotham City's earned a rest from crime, but if the forces of evil should rise again to cast a shadow on the heart of the city, call me." Unquote. Knox wonders how melodramatic can you get? Oh well, the public love this sort of thing. He asks, "How do we call him?" Gordon reveals the bat signal. Quote, "The beam, bright and yellow, shone on the side of Gotham Cathedral, a yellow moon surrounding the shape of a bat." Unquote. Knox thinks, Pulitzer Prize, here I come. My notes? At least the bat signal is shining against something. The bat signal works when it shines on a low bank of clouds, but if it's a clear night, what does the bat signal shine on? I guess it would make sense to use a tall building. Chapter 19, Scene 4. Vicky walked through the city at sunset, a city that somehow felt much safer than it ever had before. Two small boys ran out of an alley, almost colliding with her. Both of the kids were wearing torn blankets behind them. Vicky realized they were supposed to be capes. "Sorry, lady," one of the boys apologized. "We was playing Batman." She hears a sound overhead, like a boot landing on cement. She looks up to see Batman. At the same time, a limo pulls up beside her. Alfred waves to her. "I thought champagne might be in order, Mom." Inside, a champagne bottle sits in an ice bucket, already open for her. "Mr. Wayne said to tell you he'd be a bit late." "I'm not surprised, Alfred," Vicky replies. "I'm not surprised." My notes? Just a cute little scene that's continuing the wind down of the story. Chapter 19, Scene 5. They turned off the bat signal as the sun set over Gotham City, a much quieter Gotham City. Down on the streets, people laughed, music played, life went on. And overhead, the gargoyles watched silently from the old Gotham Cathedral. Long ago, it was believed that gargoyles could protect a place from evil. One of the gargoyles moved. It was the Batman. My notes: I've always loved the imagery of Batman hunkered down atop a gargoyle. Was it the Batman v Superman? Can't remember. It was one of the newer movies. I just remember one of the criminal looking up through the rain, or maybe just the darkness, at a gargoyle on the side of a building, and then it slowly dawns on him that it's actually Batman crouched there, and I thought that was really cool. Whew, guys, we did it. We are done with book 1. It's hard to believe that I started that, it's right at the beginning of January, and here we are coming up on the end of March. As far as the book, I'd probably grade this at, I guess a C+, B- territory. I would like to have seen a little more variety in the scenes where it was from Joker's point of view. I actually found that character a bit more interesting when he was Jack Napier, and that just shouldn't happen. I found the repetition of, there was just something about Bruce Wayne, or there was just something about Batman from Vicky a little bit tedious, but there were a lot of moments in which I liked Vicky as well. Knox, as you know, I kind of ran hot and cold with him. Bruce Wayne, I don't know, there wasn't a whole lot. Anyway, I'd love to know what you guys thought if you read along with me, or if you've read it before, or heck, if you haven't read it and just listened to me talk about it. I am going to wrap up here. Join me again next time for the commentary episode of Batman and the announcement of book number 2. Alright, take care. Until next time, Gothamites, happy reading.
Batman is copyrighted to DC Comics and was created by Bob Kane and Bill Finger.